Hey guys, thank you for tuning into the first episode here of Fourth String Sports. I'm Brady. This is my co-host Mitch. We're really excited to get this out to you. We plan on hopefully doing this a weekly show. We're two sports guys from southeastern Wisconsin. I've known Mitch for we're getting close to 10 years now, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
sounds about right.
yeah, met playing football. Big Packer fans, we're homers. Big Badger fans, big Bucks fans. We're going to try to be as impartial as we can when it comes to sports. But yeah, we plan on going over everything, and we just feel right now with everything that's going on in the world that having some sports to kind of take your mind off of things is really interesting and is really helpful. So today is obviously a huge day. There was some really, I'm gonna say confusing news out of Baltimore with some stuff that happened as well as the NFL schedule drop today. So just to let you guys know what we plan on doing here is that we have about 35 episodes lined up off the bat, where for each of these episodes, like today, we're going to break down kind of a week-by-week schedule of the NFL here. And then starting with Arizona, we're going to go right in alphabetical order, and we are going to sorry about that. So yeah, we're going to alphabetical order. We're going to start with the Cardinals, go over what their offseason was, go over last season with them, go over what their offseason was, and then go over, now that we have their schedule, what we think they're going to do. We're going to do that for all 32 teams. We're going to keep track of it all. We're going to hope to have who we really think is going to be in the playoffs heading up to the best of our ability. Now, keep in mind with all this stuff, there's stuff that is completely unforeseen. The Packers were 4-1 last time Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone. We missed the playoffs. Tom Brady not being part of the Patriots is huge. There's so many unforeseen things that go into picking the schedule. So we could have a team that could make the playoffs that ends up being really bad. And I'm looking at you, Cleveland. So we'll see how it works out. But we're excited. Mitch wants to talk first off about everything that's going on in Baltimore with a little guy named Earl Thomas. So Mitch, what happened?
Yeah, it's getting wild in Baltimore, Maryland. So it came out last night that Earl Thomas and his wife had a disagreement because she was unhappy with his drinking. So he leaves his house, and his brother picks him up, and I believe they go back to his brother's house. And then his wife comes over to his brother's house and walks in on him with him and his brother both naked with a bunch of women. So it's like a full-blown orgy. And then she pulls out a gun on Earl, and then Earl was able to get the gun away from him, and then she got arrested for breaking and entering, and then with intent of assault of a deadly weapon, something like that.
Yeah, and
So
like
yeah,
I've heard so many different things about this. So I've heard that it was him and his brother with several women. I've heard that it was him and his brother with one woman. I've heard that it was the gun was loaded. I heard that she said the gun wasn't loaded. I heard that they found her then like later on chasing him down the street with a knife. I heard like all this stuff. This is absolutely
yeah.
crazy. This is the drama that I missed when it comes to sports. Um, Baltimore doesn't have a great track record right now with players maybe doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. My favorite part is Earl Thomas being like, "Hey guys, this is nobody's business. Please don't lecture me or my family." And he's kind of like, "Dude, you were screwing around like with your brother. Like, I get it if it was like a close friend, but like your brother, that's I don't know. That's a little odd to me."
Well, I'm pretty sure. I think also said in that like whatever kind of press conference kind of thing that he said like this is like an everyday thing. Like he said it was like normal.
No, no, that's not normal. That's not okay. So first, it's not normal for anyone to pull a gun on anyone. Now, granted, I mean we're two white boys from suburban Wisconsin, so what do we know? But like, none of this situation is normal. Like this. It almost reminds me of when Plexico Burris shot himself. Do you remember that? Where it was. I remember the news story clearly. It was Plexico Burris is hospitalized for being shot, and
Yeah,
then
I
it's
remember.
like, oh, he shot himself. Oh, he shot himself. I believe the gun, like he was illegal to have. Like shouldn't have that gun, and it just spiraled from there. And this is what I feel like this story is. Like, okay, he was found out that he was cheating on his wife. Okay, found out his wife pulled a gun on him. Found out his brother was there. Found out she also pulled a knife on him. Found like this story is ridiculous. Like let's call it what it is. It's ridiculous, but it's ridiculously entertaining right now, and I'm so excited to see what the next couple of steps are. Um, Obviously, I don't think there's going to be any like punishment that comes out from it, but I think it's a funny story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can like punish him. I mean,
Let's
even
see
though
what
cheating sucks, it's not against the law.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he didn't break any NFL policies or rules, so he doesn't get in trouble there. I mean, the worst thing that can come out of this is his wife will either go to jail or plead down for some like community service or whatever shit, and they're probably getting a divorce. So that's probably what's going to happen.
Probably, yeah, but I mean, there's conduct detrimental to the team that you see some organizations utilize. You see stuff all the time where guys, like the one that reminds me of is Roquan Smith last year with the Bears, who ended up missing. I know it was at least one game for conduct like detrimental to the team,
Mm-hmm.
like personal issues. Where like I don't know if he's going to get outright suspended either by the NFL or by the team, but this is a bad look. Like this is a really bad look. Now, granted, stuff like this happens a lot. Like crazy stories like this happen. Like Trent Williams just a couple of weeks ago got in trouble because his dog mauled a neighbor's dog to death, and like that wasn't talked about by anybody. Like his dog I think he was breeding like some really large dogs, and they ended up killing like the neighbor dog and like pulling its body under the fenced yard and stuff like that. And like that, nobody talks about that, you know? So stories like this in the NFL happen all the time. I mean, remember like the Adrian Peterson story with his kid started out as like, oh, his kid was in the hospital. And then it's like, oh, he's in the hospital because Adrian Peterson beat the crap out of him with a switch, you know? So just the evolution of this story has been hilarious. And Earl Thomas just trying to kind of play it off like it's not really anything interesting. I think that had this happened like maybe last season, it wouldn't be super interesting. But with the fact that there's no sports right now at all, it's the biggest thing, you know? Same with Giannis's Twitter getting hacked. I don't know if you had the chance to read some of those tweets that were sent out.
No, I only got the aftermath.
Yeah, there was I saw it on Instagram. There was some stuff that was both racially detrimental, stuff along the lines of like I think one of the tweets was like I'm sick of this coronavirus, like I hate Asians, you know, was one of them. And then just a bunch of tweets of like I'm going to the Warriors, you know. And then one or two tweets where it's like the Bucks treat me like a slave if I don't put 60 up a night. And it's obviously I think he was hacked. His brother Thanasis came out like immediately and said, "Hey, dude, this is not Giannis."
And Costas.
And Kostas, yeah. They're like, "Hey, this is not Giannis," and I believe it fully. But like, if that's the case, that's a pretty crappy thing to have happened. And Giannis is a good dude. I mean, everybody knows it. You know, he's great. He's a huge figure in both Milwaukee and in the international market. But it's interesting. Right now is such an interesting time for sports because nothing's going on. That stories like this and Earl Thomas's story immediately become center page, you know?
Well, yeah, I think the honest thing, if it happens like last season, I feel like it would be talked about a little bit and then kind of go away. But with the Earl Thomas thing, I don't know. I think it's pretty wild that either way it would have been talked about. And I don't think like ESPN or any of those shows on there have talked about it. The only like sports show that I've seen talk about the Earl Thomas story is the Pat McAfee show.
Of course, it's the Pat McAfee show too. Yeah, so of course Pat McAfee would be the guy to cover that. I mean, I think he does a good job of taking care of covering the part of sports most people don't like to cover. I mean, I'm pretty sure he did a whole week episode on Quentin Nelson when he did he scored the touchdown that got called back last season, and they did the cake stand. That was hilarious. But NFL schedule has dropped. Moving on here, we're gonna break it down week by week. Just talk about some interesting matchups. There's interesting matchups across the board with every schedule. Obviously, some games are going to look a lot more interesting on paper than they end up being, just depending on what kind of team does what throughout the season, what injuries happen, that kind of stuff. So we're going to break it down here. Week 1 dropped. It's going to kick off like it normally kicks off with the reigning Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to host the Houston Texans on a Thursday night game. Mitch and I were kind of going back and forth on this. I understand why that's the opening game, but I feel like it would have been a lot more interesting for the Chiefs to play the Chargers week 1, or for the Chiefs to play the Ravens week 1. I don't know. I'm not sold on Houston. I mean, now granted, this could be Houston's chance. If Houston goes out and wins that game, the whole narrative on their season is different. But I don't know. I think it's a bad selection having them start out against Houston.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a head scratcher. I mean, I would even prefer like Denver versus the Chiefs because, we've talked about it a lot that you like how their approach their offseason, and they could be a really underrated team. And it would just be interesting to see them go against, Patrick Mahomes and all his boys.
Yeah, I agree. I think Denver has really, really stepped up over the season. And when we get to them, we'll break it down. I'm not a John Elway fan. I'm not really a Denver Bronco fan in the slightest. But I think that to me, even more so than Tampa Bay, Denver was the team that stepped their game up, that improved so drastically over the offseason. So I think it would have been interesting. Or even the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders and the Chiefs have some really great games. But again, I get Houston. People are enamored to see what exactly Houston's going to bring to the table after the offseason they had. And if Houston wins, it could be big. This to me is almost similar to how the season started last year with Green Bay at Chicago. Nobody expected Green Bay to win that game. New coach, basically, so many new signees coming in. New system going up against a 12-4 team that some people said should have been in the Super Bowl, and Green Bay ended up winning. It was the borderline the most boring game of football ever watched, with the exception of the Patriots-Rams Super Bowl. But it really set the tone for both of those teams' season, and that's what's so important about Week 1. But moving on, we're gonna go. I'm just going to rattle off the other games here, and then Mitch will point out some that he's interested in. We have Seattle going to Atlanta Week 1. Going to see Todd Gurley going up against a team he used to play against. Cleveland at Baltimore Week 1. Super interesting. Jets at Buffalo. Raiders at Panthers. Bears at Lions. Phillip Rivers' first game as a Colt is going to be at Jacksonville. Packers kicking off at Minnesota. Miami at New England. Philadelphia at Washington for Ron Rivera's first game. The Chargers at the Bengals, so Joe Burrow is going to play his first game at home. Tampa at New Orleans. Tom Brady's first game is going to be against the Saints as a 4:25 game. The Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. The Sunday night football game is going to be Dallas at the Rams. And then 2 Monday night games. You have the Steelers at the Giants and the Titans at the Broncos. Mitch, what games stand out to you?
Well, we have to go with the obvious one, Tom Brady versus Drew Brees. I kind of thought that would be the Sunday night game, but obviously they went into a different direction. It'll be interesting to see what Tom Brady can do with this team against a perennial playoff team and perennial Super Bowl contender. And then another game that could be interesting is Arizona versus the 49ers. I mean, we've all seen how good the 49ers were last year. And with some of the additions that the Cardinals made, I think they could make it a tough game.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The whole reason that the Cardinals drafted Isaiah Simmons was to be able to cover guys like George Kittle, and so that's going to be just a wildly interesting game. Another interesting one to me is going to be Cleveland at Baltimore. Now, last time Cleveland went to Baltimore, Cleveland won. They put up 40 points on the Ravens. Nick Chubb had a day. And the Browns probably could have put up more. It was probably the worst game of football the Ravens had played that season and would play until that divisional round game against the Titans. So that's interesting. We're going to see the Browns. Remember, the Browns got smoked by the Titans Week 1 last season, and that really derailed them as a team the rest of the way. So that game is wildly interesting to me. How are the Browns going to come out against a really strong Baltimore team? And can the Browns pull off a win? And what does Lamar Jackson do year 2 as a full starter? Obviously year 3, but year 2 as a full starter. Other really interesting ones, I think the Chargers at the Bengals is super interesting. How is Joe Burrow going to handle the pass rush of guys like Joey Bosa? And how are the Chargers going to play? I mean, they're going to get Derwin James back full go, barring any injuries. It's going to be who's going to be the Chargers quarterback. Right now, it's understood it's Tyrod Taylor, but could Justin Herbert step in and maybe take that? Their first season without Melvin Gordon, returning a lot of guys, but it's definitely a toss-up year for the Chargers. They were a really good team 2 seasons ago, got bounced by New England in the playoffs, and then just had a dud last year, just terrible. First season without Phillip Rivers since, I think, 2004, so 2003, 2004. So that game is super interesting. And then the other one to me is Titans at Broncos to end the season. Again, I'm interested in the Broncos to see how they play, and then we're going to see if the Titans can really keep their momentum. But Mitch, what do you think about that Tampa at New Orleans game? Tom Brady's first game as a Buccaneer.
Well, you know me, I'm pretty high on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I really like what they did this offseason. Obviously you get a guy in Tom Brady who is a very established quarterback, arguably, the greatest quarterback in NFL history. And you put him at a position where the Tampa Bay has been really needing a quarterback forever. And then you get one of his best buddies from New England and Gronk to shore up that tight end position. Mm-hmm. And they made some additions to the offensive line, and they have kind of a solid defense. I know you're not too high on it, but I think we both can agree it's solid. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can live up to that hype. I feel like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are kind of this year's Cleveland Browns, and I kind of have more confidence in Tampa Bay that they can do it over Cleveland. Yeah. And then it'll be interesting to see what the Saints can do. I mean, we saw Drew Brees at the end of the year, and he looked his age. Now, is he going to come out and look his age again, or is it going to be the Drew Brees that everybody loves? So I think that's a really big thing to watch out for.
Yeah, the Saints are kind of a stereotypical team where they play really well in the offseason, and then they get beat by the Vikings in the playoffs. They just get beat by a team that is inferior. And I think you could say that for each of the last 3 seasons, whether it was the 2 times against the Vikings or even that game against the Rams. And yeah, you can talk about that pass interference call, and that's fine. But let's not forget how that game actually ended, which was Drew Brees throwing an interception in overtime. So it is interesting. And I think that if the Saints lose that game, their season's not over. But I think if Tampa loses that game, it can really point them in a bad direction, where sort of similar to the Browns last season, where everybody expected the Browns to win. And if the Titans had won, or did end up winning, they obviously did. But going into that, I remember if the Titans did win that game, it was going to be a huge statement for them, and it was. But if the Browns lost it, their whole season was derailed. And we saw that it was, And I think that this is sort of the same to that, where if the Buccaneers do win it, okay, cool, fantastic. But if they lose it, I think it really could point their team in the wrong direction, So it's going to be interesting to see. The Saints obviously decided that Drew Brees was a better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater was. Or that Teddy Bridgewater was going to be. And that's why they re-signed Brees and let Teddy Bridgewater go to Carolina, So it's going to be a wildly interesting game, a wildly interesting matchup. I'm a little upset it's not the premier game. I'm upset it's a 4:25 game. But it's going to take the headlines from this point on until season starts. It's going to be Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, just hands down. So it is going to be interesting. But we'll move on to week 2 here. So week 2, breaking it down, the Thursday night game is going to be the Bengals at the Browns, which is huge. Joe Burrow's first road game in division against the Cleveland Browns is going to be absolutely massive. I apologize for the noise. I have dogs and they're very rambunctious. It's going to be huge. But then you got some other going down the list. You have the Giants at the Bears. You have Jacksonville at Tennessee. You have Carolina going to Tampa, so Tom Brady's first home game as a Buccaneer is going to be against the Panthers week 2. You have Denver at Pittsburgh, the Rams at the Eagles, Falcons at Cowboys, Lions at Packers, Vikings at Colts, Bills at Miami. You got the Niners against the Jets, Redskins, Cardinals, Chiefs, Chargers, Ravens, Texans, rematch of a game that was an absolute slaughter last season. You have the Patriots at the Seahawks, a rematch of Super Bowl 49, yeah. And then the Monday night game is going to be Saints at Raiders. So, Mitch, what games kind of stand out to you for that week?
I'm going to start with the primetime game. I mean, New England versus the Seahawks. I think this is really going to be a statement game for the New England Patriots. You know, as we've said before, and everyone knows that Tom Brady's not there anymore, and it looks like the guy is going to be Jared Stidham. And if the Patriots are able to beat the Seahawks, you know, which is a pretty good organization with a really great coaching quarterback, I think that might shut up some critics that the Patriots are at the end of their dynasty and they could just be in more of like a reload kind of season. And it'll be interesting to see if Seattle can do good against the Patriots, because I think the Patriots have kind of had their number a little bit, and I think it could be good momentum for them to try to get a Super Bowl this season.
Yeah, I agree. The most interesting thing to me about that matchup is, normally speaking, any team walking into Seattle is immediately at a disadvantage, you know? But with us not knowing exactly how these games are going to be played, are they going to be played in front of fans? If not, then that home field advantage that teams like Seattle and teams like Kansas City have is gone. You know, it's immediately gone. And that's huge, you know? So I think that the Patriots stand a lot better chance in that game if no fans are in attendance, because you're talking about a young quarterback who's trying to get calls in. And we've seen experienced quarterbacks go into Seattle and not play well. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Cam Newton. You see that all the time. Guys who are usually pretty premier walk into that stadium and they can't play very well. So that's an interesting tidbit to take into consideration with all these games. You know, obviously you're going to have natural home field advantage like the Packers and the Bills and the Bears and stuff have towards the end of the season, but that sound advantage is going to be huge. The game that immediately took my eye was the Falcons at the Cowboys, and here's why. Both teams drastically underperformed last year. You know, I think the Falcons started like 1-6 or 1-7 before they rattled off a couple of wins. Towards the end there, just enough to let Dan Quinn have its job. And the Cowboys have so many question marks heading into this game that this could really be a turning point that early in the season for both teams. You know, keeping in mind that with Atlanta, you've kind of reloaded a little bit. Todd Gurley is a huge name, you know, a former Georgia kid who came in. And with the Cowboys, you know, you're talking about a brand new coach. You're talking about some new players. CeeDee Lamb making his appearance. We don't know the quarterback situation. Is Dak going to be on a new contract? Is he going to sign the tag? Is Andy Dalton going to start? Who knows? And both teams are going to walk into that game in coming off of, I think, more easier matchups than previously. You know, the I'm trying to get it pulled up here. Sorry. The Cowboys have the Rams week 1, which the Rams don't seem like they're going to be as good as they nearly were. And then the Falcons play the Seahawks, and the Seahawks have huge question marks, especially on that offensive line. Once again, they didn't address their offensive line. So that to me is a really interesting matchup, of course. And then the Thursday night game, the Bengals at the Browns. Both of these teams are going to be another enigma. Nobody knows what's going to happen with either of these teams. There's a chance both of those teams could find their way into playoff contention. There's a chance that both of them could end up like 6-10, and who really knows? I don't know if there's a middle ground with either of those teams. I think that with the Bengals and the Browns, it's either they're going to go 6-10 or 10-6, and there's no in between. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. It'll be interesting to see if Cleveland can put it together this season. I mean, they get Kevin Stefanski from the Vikings, and he did pretty good as an offensive coordinator. And I think he brought out the best in Kirk Cousins. So hopefully he can bring out the best in Baker Mayfield, because if Baker Mayfield doesn't deliver this season, I think Cleveland's looking for another starting quarterback.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you get what, half a good season, half a good rookie season from Baker Mayfield, and then you get last season, which was pretty bad. And then if he puts up another bad season, you took this guy, what is he, number one overall,
Number one overall.
right? That's not a really good return for your investment. But he could definitely thrive. He got Jack Conklin as his right tackle, and then Jedrick Wills is his left. So hopefully the offensive line plays a little bit better and helps him and helps their running game. And they got Austin Hooper to just add more weapons on offense. So hopefully Kevin Stefanski can make that offense click, and the defense is pretty solid. So
and that's where I'll disagree with you. I don't think their defense really stepped up much at all. And I think the biggest position is you look at linebacker. They didn't do anything at linebacker. They drafted Grant Delpit, but they let Schobert and Kirksey both walk. Schobert went to Jacksonville and Kirksey to Green Bay. So that center of your defense, that anchor of your defense, has a huge question mark on it. And when you play in the AFC North, where you have to play James Conner twice a year, you have to play Lamar Jackson twice a year, and you have to play the Cincinnati halfback, Joe Mixon, twice a year, and you don't have solid athletic linebackers, you're going to get torched. And that's what I think this Cleveland team could be. I think that this is a Cleveland offense that could put up 35 points a game, but that their defense is going to give up 38, And that's the huge question mark. Yeah, they're bringing back Myles Garrett. Cool, fantastic, but nobody else on that defense has shown an ability to step up. Nobody has. And so that defense is going to be a huge question mark. I think Baker Mayfield is going to play better. I hope Baker Mayfield plays better. I like the kid. I like the swagger that he brings. And I think that if there's one thing Cleveland desperately needs, it's continuity at the coaching position and at the quarterback position. Johnny Manziel got 2 seasons. Brandon Weeden got like 2 seasons. Brady Quinn got like 2 seasons. Colt McCoy got like 2 seasons. Like, they don't give anybody any actual time to try to develop. And now that the offensive line is a lot steadier, we're going to see what Baker Mayfield is actually made of. So it is going to be interesting. But moving on to week 3 here, the Thursday night game is going to be the Dolphins at the Jaguars. So maybe we'll see Tua playing. Who knows? It kind of sounds like, from what I've gauged listening to other teams and some sports reporting, that as of right now, the understanding is that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be the starter and Tua is going to learn. I don't think that's bad. Ryan Fitzpatrick isn't a bad quarterback, but I think Tua is going to have to get on the field. And then you move to Bears at Falcons, Rams at Bills, Redskins at Browns, Titans at Vikings, Raiders at New England, Niners at the Giants, Bengals, Eagles, Texans, Steelers, Jets, Colts, Panthers, Chargers, Lions, Cardinals, Buccaneers against the Broncos. I think that could be a huge showdown. The Cowboys at the Seahawks. The Sunday night game is going to be Green Bay in New Orleans. Going to be a huge matchup. Green Bay has not played well the last couple of times they've gone to the Saints. And then the Monday night game is Chiefs and Ravens. And the Chiefs and Ravens played a great game early in the season last year. And I think this is going to be a great game. That Chiefs-Ravens game may be what the Rams-Chiefs game was 2 years ago. Week 3 is so interesting to me. Buccaneers at Broncos, I think, is going to be a fantastic football game with the offensive firepower both teams are going to bring. Chiefs-Ravens is going to be great. Packers-Saints. This was the matchup we were supposed to see in the playoffs until the Vikings ruined it. So how is Green Bay going to respond going to New Orleans? And again, without any fans in the stadium, how effective is the Superdome? The Superdome is a ridiculously difficult place to play. But if there's no fans there, or if you're limited to quarter full fans, it's all of a sudden it's not as scary to play at, So those are the games that jump out to me. Mitch, what kind of games jump out to you?
Yeah, there's definitely the big games, the Packers versus the Saints, aka Rodgers versus Breeze, and then the Chiefs versus the Ravens. And then I think another kind of good game that it's on here is the Tennessee Titans versus the Minnesota Vikings, because I think this is kind of a litmus test for them.
Yeah.
With the Minnesota losing Stephon Diggs and basically their whole secondary, it'll be interesting to see if they can bounce back and, maybe this is the year that they can put it together. And if they beat the Tennessee Titans, who was in the AFC Championship game, it's a huge momentum booster. And then with the Tennessee Titans playing the Vikings, who the Vikings are, almost always a playoff team this past decade. Let's see if Ryan Tannehill really is that kind of quarterback that can get him over the hump. I mean, he only played half a season plus the playoffs. So let's see if this season his magic continues and that offense can continue to chug along. And with Jarrell Casey gone and Logan Ryan gone, hopefully the defense can shore up their deficiencies and keep them going.
Yeah, that was another game that really popped out to me. Even just looking through the schedule, I went, "Oh, that's going to be a good game," because it's the barring him being hurt. Everybody knows what Tennessee's going to do. They're going to give the ball to Derrick Henry 30 times a game, and all of a sudden, the Vikings defense, who's been so good for so long, has some question marks in it with them losing a lot of key players. And I think one of the most telling things was Andrew Sendejo leaving, and that doesn't. This is going to be a hot take, but remember, Andrew Sendejo was originally with the Eagles. He got cut. He went to Minnesota. The second the season was over, there were talks of the Vikings wanted to bring Sendejo back. And Sendejo instead decided to leave on, I think, a 1-year, $2 million contract to go play for the Browns. So the dude basically took veterans minimum to go play for Cleveland. And that, to me, is a really telling sign because the Vikings secondary has question marks. Yeah, they drafted corner help. Yeah, Harris is still there, but there's a lot of question marks on that defense, especially with some of the people that had to leave. And the other question mark is that Kirk Cousins got a fancy new extension. He reworked his contract. So how is that going to work? How is Dalvin Cook going to work? Again, their offensive line should be healthy. I think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be a great ground and pound game where both teams maybe combine for 30 passes in the entire game, and then there's 60 running plays, that game really jumps out on the schedule to me. It's super interesting. And then there was one other game that I wanted to talk about, and that's going to be the Jets at the Colts. And I think that if we're talking about litmus tests, this is a really good one. The Jets got off to a really bad start in the season because of Sam Darnold's illness. What do you have? You had mono or something?
Yeah, he had mono.
To kick the season off. And then Trevor Siemian basically breaks his leg on Monday night against the Browns. And it just got their season off to such a bad start. So now we're going to see, okay, Le'Veon Bell part 2, how's he going to do in second season? Because he wasn't good last season. How is their offensive line improved? The loss of Robbie Anderson was big, but how is the offensive line and the wide receiver core going to improve? Defensively, I think they're still in pretty okay shape as long as Jamal Adams is there. So it's interesting. And then on the flip side with the Colts, the Colts are walking in with – obviously they got better on the defensive line with the trade they made with the Niners to get DeForest Buckner, I believe. And the rest of that defense is still there. They've got a really good offensive line, a really good halfback, but the question mark for the Colts is the quarterback position. Are they going to get Phillip Rivers 2 seasons ago, or are they going to get Phillip Rivers from last season? And on a 1-year deal, it's make or break, and that could be a good game. But yeah, those are, I think, some really interesting games for week 3. Mitch, I've rattled off enough. Do you want to tackle week 4 here?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick us off with week 4. So the Thursday night game is going to be the Denver Broncos at the New York Jets. And then for the 1 o'clock games, we got Cardinals versus Panthers, Ravens versus Redskins, Steelers versus Titans, Chargers versus Buccaneers, Seahawks versus Dolphins, Colts versus Bears, Jags versus Bengals, Browns versus Cowboys, Saints versus Lions, Vikings versus Texans, and then the 4 o'clock game is Giants, Rams, Bills, Raiders, Patriots, Chiefs, and then the Sunday night game is Philly versus San Fran. And then the Monday night game is Atlanta versus our Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, so some really good matchups there. Atlanta versus Green Bay, obviously the Monday night game. I don't know if that's going to be as big as it would have been maybe 2 seasons ago, um, but it's going to be good for Green Bay to see how they handle. This was a team that got gashed in the run game against the Niners, and now you're going to go up against Atlanta, knowing if he's healthy, that Todd Gurley is still, in my mind, one of the best backs in the NFL. So how are they going to respond? And then with the duo of Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, how are our corners going to respond? Now, I remember the NFC Championship game against the Falcons where Kevin King lined up against Julio Jones. And he didn't play great, but he played a lot better than I thought he would. Julio Jones still put up really good numbers, but that was against a lot of some of the other guys who were guarding him. Kevin King, I think, played pretty well. And I apologize. That was not the NFC Championship game. That was the week – 2 or 3 matchup the season afterwards. So I misspoke that.
Yeah, I was going to say that was Ladarius Gutner, who's our number 1 corner playing in that championship game.
Yeah, I apologize because we drafted Kevin King, so I apologize for my mistake. Yeah. But in that matchup against the Falcons in that game where the Packers got blown out, I didn't think that King played bad. So now that he's had a couple more seasons, remember he had 5 interceptions last season, and Jair Alexander, and you got Josh Jackson still, and you got Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos. How are they going to handle that? I think that's a really interesting game. The other game that really caught my eye, there's 2 of them, was Cardinals at Panthers and Browns at Cowboys. The Cardinals at the Panthers game, the Panthers obviously drafted only defensive players with the understanding that offensively they're going to be pretty okay. But they let Greg Olsen go. Wide receiver position is still a huge question. They obviously re-signed Christian McCaffrey to, I think, the biggest contract a running back has in the NFL right now. And Teddy Bridgewater is there. So how is that going to work? It's also massively interesting because they're 2 college coaches going against each other, from the Big 12. Cliff Kingsbury from Texas Tech and Matt Rule from Temple and then, Baylor. So that's going to be interesting, and how Kyler Murray handles that situation, and how the Panthers handle what should be a really dynamic offense without Luke Kuechly playing. That's interesting. But then the Browns at the Cowboys, I mean, this just seems like a ground and pound type of football game. Like, this reminds me of the Cowboys-Vikings game that was a Sunday night game last season. I didn't root for anybody. I hated both teams. But it was such an interesting and entertaining game to watch because both teams were pretty okay on defense, but were really good on offense. And it just led to some really good football. So those are the games that really pop out to me, Mitch.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you with Cleveland versus Dallas. In my mind, I think they're really similar teams.
Yeah.
Both had very high expectations last year and really faltered, and they kind of play similar styles with Nick Chubb leading that offense and Ezekiel Elliott leading the Cowboys offense. So this is kind of a test for them to see, like, hey, is this the season that we can actually live up to the hype, and we know we have the talent, but can we just, prove it?
And what's funny is that you could say that for both teams.
Exactly.
Like, you could say, we finally have the hype. We finally found our coach, We finally have good wide receivers. Our offensive line is a lot better. And it's interchangeable for both teams, It's like where the Browns really shored up their offensive line. Now the Cowboys have a huge question at center, and both teams have really good wide receivers, a really good halfback, and pretty so-so defensive players. So I agree. I think they're a lot more similar than they are different.
Yeah, and then the other game that caught my eye was the LA Chargers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, sorry, Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You mean the Tampa Bay Gronkaneers?
There we go. I mean, these are the 2 teams that were pretty much in it for the Tom Brady sweepstakes, and obviously Tampa Bay is the one who got him. So maybe this is kind of a revenge game, I guess, for the Chargers. And they're kind of similar teams. They both have stacked weapons at the wideout position. Their offensive lines are questionable, but I think the Chargers kind of beat them out with the acquisitions of Trey Turner and Brian Bulaga, Iowa. And
really good tight ends with questionable health issues for both teams, and Hunter Henry and Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah, and then the Chargers obviously have the better defense over the Buccaneers. And it got better with Linval Joseph on the defensive line to shore up the rush defense, and then Kenneth Murray, who I think is gonna ball out next to Derwin James. So I think this could be a shootout.
I agree. I could also see this being a really interesting and entertaining, like 24-21 football game, you know, or like a 21-20 game where just the winner got a touchdown at the last moment or kicked a field goal or something. That game to me seems like the game that whatever team gets the first turnover is going to end up winning. And the reason that I say that is that we'll get to how I feel about the Tampa Bay defense when we get into Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
I agree completely that the Chargers are a better defense in that if you could have a guy like Kenneth Murray go up against Gronk and you can keep Derwin James over the top to help cover Chris Godwin, to help cover Mike Evans, that's huge. That is huge. And with a massive question mark that Tampa Bay has at halfback, you know, that advantage goes to the Chargers. And not being able to run the ball, being one-dimensional, can really hurt that team. And I know that I've heard it where people say, well, that's just the way Bruce Arians coaches. And I disagree completely because if you remember the 13-3 season out in Arizona, David Johnson had 2,000 career yards. Like he had 2,000 yards that season in both passing and rushing, you know? So
I mean, when in David Johnson's prime, I thought he was arguably the best running back in the NFL because the dude could run like nobody's business, and he was an awesome pass catcher. And unfortunately, he got hurt and is kind of getting forgotten the time now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so we were going over that Chargers-Buccaneers matchup there. It is interesting. I think you could really say that about any game that the Buccaneers are going to play this season because they play in the NFC South and because of who they have to play this season. You know, the AFC West and the NFC North is huge. So it is interesting. But let's move on to Week 5 here. I'm going to take this one, Mitch. I'll have you tackle Week 6. Thursday night game, Tampa Bay at Chicago. You know, huge game, just in the sense of the Chicago media market, obviously. But that's going to be a massive game, a good litmus test for the Bears. You have the Panthers at the Falcons, Bengals at the Ravens, Jags at Texans, Raiders at Chiefs, Broncos at the Patriots, Cardinals at Jets, Eagles at Steelers, Battle of Pennsylvania right in there. The Bills at the Titans, Rams at the Redskins, Dolphins at the Niners, Colts at the Browns, Giants at the Cowboys, Vikings at the Seahawks. The Monday night game is the Chargers at the Saints, and this is the first round of the byes here. The bye weeks that team are the Lions and the Packers. The games that really jump out to me are some of the later ones, and that's the 3:25 game, the Giants at the Cowboys. Two teams that always play each other super well, but this is going to be how can Daniel Jones play against the Cowboys, especially in Dallas. You know, last season the Cowboys and Giants kicked their season off in Dallas, and Daniel Jones came in garbage time, and he fumbled, and he didn't play well. You know, and then at the same time, how have the Giants improved? You know, good draft pick on the offensive line, improvement on defense with some of the players they signed. Granted, I think they overpaid for all of them, but improvement through and through. And then the other game is Vikings at Seahawks. That was a fantastic football game we watched on Monday night last season between those two teams. And I'm excited to see a rematch of it. And I think that it's going to be a good test for both of those teams, especially early in the season. That feels like a game that when we get to week 13, 14, 15, and later in the season, that teams are going to look back and go, damn, I wish we would have won that one. Whoever wins, you know, or whoever loses. That seems like the type of game where it's like, had we picked that up, we wouldn't be in this position. The same way as like had Green Bay not dropped it to Philadelphia in a game we shouldn't have lost, we would have had the number one seed, you know? Not saying either of these two teams are number one seeds, but when it comes to battling for who gets the fifth playoff spot or who gets the sixth or who goes to 3 or who goes to 4, this could be a really interesting game between those two teams.
Yeah, I think I have a similar mindset about a different game, and that's the Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans,
Hmm.
because I think these two teams had the potential to be the number three overall seed in the AFC, because obviously the Ravens and the Chiefs are going to either get one or two. Because I think this is going to be a really tough game. They kind of have similar styles. The Tennessee really relies on the run
Yeah.
in Derrick Henry, and then the Buffalo Bills rely on the run in Josh Allen and Devin Singletary. And then it'll be interesting to see if Stephon Diggs can really elevate this offense, and if the defense can keep up its what do I say, eliteness, because when they're on, they're pretty tough to
Yeah.
score and get yards on. So if they can do that, and now that Tom Brady's out of the division, they could easily win the division and get that number three overall seed. And if Tennessee can tap into that magic that they had last year and not get like I guess, an AFC championship hangover and just like revert to what the Atlanta Falcons are now, this could be a huge momentum game to keep up that magic.
Yeah. Now the point that I'm going to push back on you on is remember last season, 5 teams who made the playoffs were not in the playoffs the season before. The Bills, the Titans, the Packers, the Vikings, and the Niners. Of those 5 teams, the Titans, Packers, and Niners all went to the championship game. And I think that this upcoming season is going to be similar, where I think that maybe 4 or 5 teams who didn't make the playoffs last year are going to. And I look at the Bills and the Titans as 2 teams that run the risk of missing the playoffs next year. You know, and I would say that Josh Allen might be more at risk of losing his job than Baker Mayfield would. And the reason is that we know the Bills' defense is really good, right? Baker Mayfield doesn't get to hide behind that in Cleveland, you know. So now with bringing in Stephon Diggs and the hefty price you paid for him, if Josh Allen doesn't take that elite step to the next level, I think he runs the risk of possibly either getting benched or having some serious competition come in. Now, granted, he didn't get the chance to mentor anybody really. The guys he sat behind are, we're talking about like Matt Barkley and stuff like that. Like, come on. But it's interesting to me. The Bills, Achilles heel has been that offense. That offense has not produced to the level that they really wanted to. And now hopefully guys like Stephon Diggs can help them out with that. But the Bills are a question mark to me. That whole AFC East is a question mark to me. That could be a division where we see the division champion walk in with an 8-8 record, and get to host a playoff game. But I agree that that's a really interesting game. So, Mitch, why don't you break down Week 6 for us here?
All right, let's get there. Week 6. All right, Week 6. Our Thursday night game is the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Buffalo Bills. And then the 1 o'clock games on Sunday are the Bengals versus Colts, Lions versus Jags, Falcons versus Vikings, Skins versus Giants, Bears versus Panthers, Ravens versus Eagles, Texans versus Titans, Browns versus Steelers. Then the 4 o'clock games are Dolphins Broncos, Jets Chargers, Packers Buccaneers. And then the primetime game is LA Rams versus the San Francisco 49ers. And then the Monday night game is the Arizona Cardinals versus the Dallas Cowboys.
And then the teams on the bye next season or next Week 6 of next season: Saints, Seahawks, Patriots, Raiders. The game that really jumps out to me is Rams at Niners. There's so many question marks with this Rams team that Week 6 could be the make or break. Looking at their schedule, walking into that game, the Rams are going to have a huge question mark, and with how good we expect fully the 49ers to be, if the Rams can maybe walk into that game and let's say steal a win, well, that could be pretty big for them. This is a Rams team walking into that. Their first 5 opponents, you have the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Bills, the Giants, the Redskins. The Rams could go 5-0. The Rams could go 2-3. And I don't know. And there's a huge question mark there, But you got to feel like if the Rams walk into that game, let's say 3-2 or worse, and then they lose, season may as well be over, you know. And similarly for the Niners, if they walk into that game and they mess it up, you know, their season could be in trouble too. Not saying, no, I think the Niners are in a much more solid place than the Rams are. But looking at the Niners' first few weeks, you've got the Cardinals, the Jets, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Dolphins heading into that game. There's no reason that the Niners shouldn't be 5-0 walking into that game. And if they're not 5-0 walking into that game, I think there's question marks. Let me say that again. If they're not 4-1 walking into that game, they may drop a game that they shouldn't, right? Like they shouldn't have lost to the Falcons last season at home, but they did. You know, every team drops games they shouldn't. Green Bay shouldn't have lost to the Chargers last season, but they did. You know, the Patriots shouldn't have lost to Miami to end the season, but they did. So if they're not at least 4-1 walking into that game, then they're going to have a question mark. And I think that game is super interesting. The other one that really jumps out to me is going to be Ravens at Eagles. I think these two teams on paper match up really well. You know, good but not great defenses. And the Ravens obviously have a huge knotted offense. But the Eagles, just they have this knack of playing up to whoever they're playing against. You know, when the Eagles play a really good team, they find a way to play really good. And then when the Eagles play the Giants, they find a way to play really bad, you know? So those two games are super interesting to me in the outcomes there. And the Eagles season could be a jeopardy with a loss there. But at the same time, imagine the boost if the Eagles beat the Ravens. You know, that's huge. That's massive to kick off the season. And we're talking week 6. Is Carson Wentz even healthy by week 6? Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. The two games that caught my eye, we'll start off with the Browns versus the Steelers. I mean, these two teams kind of hate each other right now with the whole Myles Garrett incident, and he's going to be back. So that'll be the kind of the off-field kind of narrative that'll see if Myles Garrett gets in trouble with the Steelers again.
And it's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and
in Pittsburgh.
at Heinz Field. And then I think this is another good test for the Browns to see if they can really do something this year. And it'll be interesting on the flip side for the Steelers to see if Big Ben still has it or if that arm injury really pampered him with, and plus his, he's getting up there.
And I've seen him get some flack from some people because they don't feel like he's taking this offseason seriously. You know, and Ben Roethlisberger has always been a guy who never really seems to take the season or the job at quarterback super seriously. Not in that I don't think he's serious about his job, but I think that there's a lot of work in front of the cameras that goes into being a quarterback that Aaron Rodgers does and that Tom Brady does and that Drew Brees does. But you don't hear that from Ben Roethlisberger, you know. Whatever he does behind the scenes, I'm sure he's an elite level. But people are talking about, well, it looks like he got a little bit fat, and it looks like he's not taking the rehab super seriously, and he still has the huge beard, which, hey, I'm not discriminating against. I think it looks good on him. But there's question marks there, and I agree with you completely. You got another game that stands out to you there, Mitch?
Yeah, that's got to be our home team, Green Bay Packers versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
In Tampa.
In Tampa. So Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady. I think these guys are both considered the GOAT to a lot of people. To compare it to the NBA, I think Tom Brady is MJ and Aaron Rodgers is LeBron. So it'll be interesting to see these two, most likely their last time going head-to-head against each other. And it'll be interesting to see if our defense, primarily our secondary, can cover a team with weapons like Tampa has and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rob Gronkowski. And if they can hold up and get that pass rush that we had going, and the rush defense looks solid, I think this could set us up for a nice season.
Now, when we get to Green Bay and we get to Tampa, we'll break it down. In talking with you previously, this is a game that you've picked Green Bay to lose. This is a game that, to me, I love, and I love it for a few reasons. One, Green Bay is going to Tampa in mid-October. If this game were in September, when it's going to be 95 degrees, not saying it might not be in mid-October, but it's a little bit better. I immediately give the nod to the Buccaneers. But because this is a little bit later in the year, it's going to cool down a little bit. That heat shouldn't be as big of an issue. Green Bay has not been a team that travels well. You know, we've seen it. We've seen it in the trips out to California last season. We've seen it in the trips down south before. They don't seem to travel well outside of going to like the NFC East. The other reason this is interesting is that last time Rodgers and Brady played, 2 seasons ago now?
Yeah, something like that.
2 seasons ago in New England, it didn't live up to expectations. And not from Tom Brady, but from the Packers. The Packers were not the team that they expected. Remember, that was after coming off of a tough loss at Los Angeles, where Ty Montgomery fumbled the ball away before we really got the chance. We probably should have and could have won that game, if we're going to talk just honestly. So that game didn't live up to the expectation, and the Patriots absolutely mauled the Packers. And I know that I was super disappointed because that was probably the last time we were going to see Aaron Rodgers play Tom Brady. And now we've been blessed with Tom Brady joining the NFC. So not only could we get them to see each other play this season, but depending on how both teams could do, we could see them play each other again next season, And this is – I don't like the MJ to LeBron comparison. I compare it a little bit more to like MJ to like Hakeem Olajuwon, in that Brady has won championship after championship after championship, but the whole thing is his supporting cast. While I think most people would say Hakeem Olajuwon was one of, if not the most talented players, but he didn't have the championships that were there. I think he won 2, but he didn't have the championships. So I don't know if I like the LeBron comparison because Aaron Rodgers hasn't had the opportunity to go to the championships the way that LeBron has. But it's going to be interesting. And just taking the quarterback perspective out of it, these are 2 very different teams, right? Tampa is really strong at wide receiver, but we have no idea what they're doing at halfback. And Green Bay is really strong at halfback, but we have no idea what the wide receiver position is going to look like. I would say that Tampa maybe has a better run-stopping defense, but Green Bay has a much better pass-stopping defense, with the exception of Green Bay gave up a lot of big plays, and that's what Tampa's going to look for. It's going to be a miraculous game. I think it's going to be wildly interesting to watch. Frankly, I'm surprised it's not the primetime game. I don't understand why Cardinals-Cowboys is the Monday night game, but Rodgers versus Brady is not. I don't get it. But, we don't make the rules. Hopefully something will happen where that game will get flexed. It is a 325 game, so it does have the opportunity to get flexed into a better position. But it is going to be interesting. So we'll move on here to week 7. I think we'll go to week 8, and then we'll stop this episode. We'll turn around. We'll just flip out the other episode right away, but this way we can split up the recordings for you guys a little bit, so it's not so much to listen to. But week 7 here, we have noon game, Packers at Texans. First time we're going to see Deshaun Watson play against the great Aaron Rodgers. Going to be fantastic. Giants at Eagles, Lions at Falcons, Steelers at Ravens, Browns at Bengals, Chargers at Dolphins, Panthers at Saints. Teddy Bridgewater heads back against his old team, so we're going to see, did the Saints make a mistake maybe with letting Teddy Bridgewater leave? Bills at Jets, Cowboys, Redskins, Seahawks at Cardinals, Chiefs at Broncos, Niners at Patriots, Buccaneers at the Raiders, and the Monday night game is the Bears against the Rams, with the byes being the Titans, the Colts, the Vikings, and the Jags. Mitch, what game or games stand out to you?
Right away, the game that stands out to me is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. Obviously, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in week 1, saying that we thought this should be the first game of the season. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. They lost a couple players, but for the most part, they kept that whole core together. So they can definitely make another run at a Super Bowl. And then the Denver Broncos, they got weapons. They have a solid offensive line. They have a good running back stable. Their defense has gotten better, and it's really all in Drew Lock's hands. He doesn't have to play like all pro level, but he's just got to be like an Alex Smith type of contribution, and this team could go places.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he has to play Pat Mahomes level. Like I've seen people who are like, Drew Lock could possibly be Pat Mahomes-esque next season. And I disagree with that. I don't think he's going to throw 50 touchdowns. No, are you kidding me? But he has the cast to do it, which is the first time we can say that in Denver in a really long time. And not just the cast in terms of wide receivers, but in terms of, Noah Fant is a great tight end, and I hope to do a film analysis on him because he's so interesting. He's such a good tight end. They still have a lot of help there at the tight end position. They have Philip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon at halfback. There's contributors all over the place. Plus, unlike pretty much every other team in the NFL, they have a defensive-minded head coach. So that defense looks pretty good. I agree that the Chiefs did a lot better than I thought, considering that I had more money in my bank account than they had in cap space, for a large part of the season. But there's always questions when it comes to reigning Super Bowl champs. We haven't had a team win the Super Bowl and then win it the following year since Super Bowl, I think 38 and 39 with the Patriots, and most teams who win the Super Bowl, with the exception of the Patriots, end up not making the playoffs the next season. And the Chiefs had question marks. Remember, they got hot going into the postseason, but this was a Chiefs team that had a really bad loss to the Titans towards the end of the season that had some tough games that they played. I can't hold the Packer game against them because Pat Mahomes wasn't playing. But they lost to the Texans early in the season, and they really shouldn't have lost that game. So it is interesting. The game that stands out to me, and maybe it's just because I viscerally hate them, but it's Bears at Rams. Last season, this was the game that broke the Chicago Bears. This was the game where they had lost some. They finally turned around. They got a win. And this was the game where if they beat the Rams, it could have sparked a run for a possible playoff position. But Trubisky played so bad that he ended up getting benched. Now, they said it was because of a hip injury. But, I think anybody would tell you that he just played bad. And this was, I think, the moment where, in working with Bears fans and in listening to ESPN 1000 quite a bit, I think a lot of Bears fans would say this was the point they lost faith in Matt Nagy. The play that just keeps running through my mind was third down towards the end of the game. They're on the left hash, and they run a quarterback pitch option toward the weak side of the field. And Trubisky runs, doesn't make any kind of move, and just immediately pitches it to Cohen, who I think loses like 3 or 4 yards. And it was such a confusing play call. First off, if you're going to run an option, most people would tell you either run it to the strong side of the field, like the field where you have space, or you create a motion on the weak side to get a defender to pull away. And then if you're going to run it, the quarterback has to make some move to get the defender to bite before you pitch, and Trubisky did none of that. None of that happened. And the Bears ended up losing. And this was the point where I think a lot of people across the NFL lost their faith in the Bears. And so this could be a sort of revenge game for Chicago. This is going to be, if it's Trubisky starting or if it's Foles or just Matt Nagy being a coach, this is going to be a good test for them going back out to Los Angeles to play the Rams.
Yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting matchup. And then one other game that I think could be good is the Dallas Cowboys versus the Washington Redskins. The thing that most gets me hyped out about it is Dwayne Haskins is probably going to be starting, and I think this is going to be a test for him and to kind of show his stuff, because I think a lot of people are really low on him just because of how his rookie season went and this offseason. I mean, people were talking about, could Washington pull an Arizona Cardinals and get Tua or somebody else to be their quarterback? And I think this is his time at home to shut up the critics playing against the Dallas Cowboys, who are the favorites in the division and I think are always like Super Bowl favorites. So I think it'll be a good game for him to show his stuff.
Yeah, the other really interesting aspect of that game is how Chase Young is going to handle one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Chase Young is going to have to line up against some really good tackles. and is going to have to play against former Ohio State teammate, Ezekiel Elliott. Well, actually, I don't know if they were there at the same time, but still, 2 Buckeyes. And it's going to be super interesting as to how he handles that, because I think Chase Young is going to be really good against most offensive lines, but he has to be fantastic against the Cowboys. He has to, That's what made Michael Strahan so good, was that Michael Strahan was pretty good against most people, but he was really good against his division, and for Chase Young to draw comparisons to any kind of, pass rusher, he has to play really good against division. So that's a really interesting matchup. And I agree with you that I don't think Dwayne Haskins has gotten enough credit. People have been sleeping on him. He started really bad. I mean, bad game against the Giants, bad game against the Vikings when he stepped in. But towards the end of the season, he was putting stuff together, And it doesn't help that the Redskins aren't really strong at either the halfback or the wide receiver position, or even the tight end position. But I think I agree. I think that could be a good game, and I think that could be a sleeper game that the Redskins maybe win. We'll get into it. But week 8, and then we'll wrap up here this episode. We'll drop another one right afterwards. Week 8, we have Vikings at Packers. We have Falcons at the Panthers. We have Patriots at the Bills. Titans at Bengals. Raiders at the Browns. Colts at the Lions. Jets at the Chiefs. Rams at the Dolphins. Jaguars at the Chargers. Saints at the Bears. Niners at the Seahawks. We have the Cowboys at the Eagles. And the Monday night game, the Buccaneers at the Giants. Now, I have heard that might be the game, since Tom Brady's coming to town, where they retire Eli Manning into the Ring of Honor for the Giants. I think that there would be no better game to do it against.
Ultimate troll move.
Say that again?
Ultimate troll move.
Oh, yeah. Oh, exactly. And 6 teams on a bye. You have the Broncos, Ravens, Texans, Redskins, Cardinals, and the Steelers all on a bye. Mitch, what game stands out for you with that week?
I'm gonna go with the 2 divisional games that are happening at the end of Sunday night. So to start off, the Niners versus the Seahawks. I mean, their last game that they played against each other in the regular season was super the Seahawks came within inches of letting the Green Bay Packers being the number 1 seed. And I think that it's going to be another fun game to watch, and I'm really hyped for it. And then the Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles made some additions. Some of them are questionable, so it'll be interesting to see if they can get back on track. And the Cowboys are another team in the NFC East that's trying to get back on track to knowing what they can be. And I just think that when they play against each other, it's always something to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I think those two games are really going to take the forefront. The Seahawks, again, didn't do anything to help their offensive line, and when you have to play a really strong pass rush, across that division, you have to play a really strong pass rush, and you don't do anything to help your quarterback or your offensive line. And that's difficult. But some of the matchups in that game, I mean, Bosa against Wilson, Metcalf against Sherman, and then on the defensive side, Garoppolo versus Wagner. You got, the Griffin brothers versus some of their wide receivers, the Niners wide receivers. It's going to be a great game. The Niners and the Seahawks are a game that always impresses. They always play each other well. Even going back to the Legion of Boom versus the Kaepernick Niners, and some of those games they played, they were fantastic. And that Cowboys-Eagles game is always interesting. The Eagles seem to be the only team that the Cowboys can beat consistently. And then, the other game that really stood out to me, and we're going to talk about them first time on the list today, is the Colts at the Detroit Lions. And the reason is Detroit has so many question marks walking into this game, that this was a Detroit team that was super similar to the Chiefs in that they held a lot of leads going into the last couple of minutes. But unlike the Chiefs, they blew almost all of them. Are we going to get a fully healthy Matt Stafford? Are we going to get a fully healthy team? Remember, they added strength defensively, as well as they drafted DeAndre Swift out of Georgia. Great pickup to go with Kerryon Johnson, who's a good halfback. To go with Galladay at the wide receiver position. It's a good Detroit team on paper, but how is it going to work in practice? And I think that game against the Colts is a really good opportunity for them, knowing that the Colts are probably a team that's a little bit above their weight class, to get some kind of win that might put them on the map, So that game is super interesting to me. But with that here, we're going to wrap up that's the first 8 weeks of the NFL season. We're going to come right back at you with the next 8 weeks here to wrap it up. I do appreciate you guys listening. Again, that's Mitch. I'm Brady. This is the Fourth String Sports Podcast. You can find us here on YouTube, or we hope to get up on Spotify. Otherwise, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you disagree with, or anything you want to comment on, you can always find us you can always email us. We are a Fourth String SP. That is FOURTH string SP @gmail.com. Send us an email. But Mitch, any closing thoughts here before I wrap it up?
I haven't seen the other half of the schedule, so hopefully we get some exciting matchups to talk about, and hopefully sports can get back soon.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, these games we're not talking until September, but news coming out of places like Oregon and Washington, where games will have to be played in the future here without fans in the stadium, is upsetting, especially because we had a great matchup. I think Ohio State was going to Oregon early in the season. That now, Autzen Stadium is a great stadium. The zoo is really great. It's a fun place. And now to maybe play that game without fans I think it's disappointing, but I'm still going to watch it. I think people are still going to be wildly entertained. So it's a work in progress, to say the least. But hey, that's why we have 30 plus episodes scheduled for you guys, because we want to take care of you. We want to go as in depth. And if you have any comments or anything, you don't like my hair or Mitch's hair, or you want to figure out what that noise is in the background, it's my dogs. Please feel free to just shoot us an email. Again, that's fourthstringsp@gmail.com. So thank you so much, you guys, for tuning in, and you have yourself a fantastic night.